अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। चले, आवाज आ रही है सारों को? या कैन यू हेयर मी? अहमद।
सलाम सर। यस,
वालेकुम
आवाज आ
सलाम।
रही
ठीक है, वन से।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। चले, वीवर एक तो इसको मैं नेम कर लूँ। फॉर्मूलाज।
सही। लास्ट वाला कॉन्सेप्ट थोड़ा एक्सप्लेन करेंगे? ये वो वाटर वाला।
हाँ ठीक है, वो मैं कर लूँ। ठीक है, अपना बाकी को। अच्छा, वाटर वाला उधर से स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं, ठीक है। तो वो अच्छा रिकॉर्ड हो रही है। अच्छा चले, लास्ट टाइम दिस इज वेयर वी गोना स्टार्ट, ठीक है, कि वी डिड कि it was just a concept कि I told you कि the most important chemical, ठीक है, the most important chemical that is water, ठीक है, water is, I told you, everywhere, ठीक है, that's the most important chemical. uh, और planet Earth पे it's almost everywhere. All reactions pretty much happen in water, ठीक है। और मैंने last time I discussed कि why is chemistry happening on planet Earth? The reason is कि if you have a particle of sodium and you have a particle of chlorine on any other planet, in most planets, they don't react. Okay? The reason they don't react is because they're not able to move. Like sodium wants to lose electrons, or chlorine, on the other hand, wants to, let's say, gain electrons. They will need to meet each other, okay, for that to happen. They need to sort of collide. The water kind of provides you with a medium in which these particles can float around and they can eventually collide. And that's when they react. That's when they lose electrons, they gain electrons. They become positive ions, they become negative ions, they start attracting each other, and they end up forming different compounds. Okay? So water is extremely important, and water is it provides the medium in which the particles can float around and they can collide and they can react. Okay? So the concept was कि since everything is happening in water, okay, like for example, आपके cell में your blood, all your reactions are happening in water, right? 70% of the human body is just water, right? So water plays a very crucial role. And I told you water is not just water, okay? I mean, for example, if you see a bunch of water molecules, right? It's one O and sharing electrons with H's, right? And they're floating around. So I told you that some of these water molecules will collide and they will break down. They will break and they will ionize. So sometimes what happens is, like if you have thousands of molecules, not all of them, a few of them, a few of the water molecules will break down and they will produce H plus one and OH minus one ions. ठीक है, ये यहाँ पे ना, for example, if the water molecule breaks up and the H leaves its electrons and becomes plus one, and the OH on the other hand becomes OH minus one because it got an extra electron from H. Okay? It doesn't really matter. You just need to know that water ionizes and ends up producing these two ions. One is H plus one and the other one is OH minus one. So your water over here is not just going to be water. It will have a few of the water molecules will break down and they will produce H plus one and OH minus one ions. Okay? Is this idea clear?
सर
Zan, ये clear
वाटर
है?
आयनाइजर्स वाला एक बार एक्सप्लेन करेंगे?
नहीं, water के molecules है ना, water के molecules हैं, you have water molecules, so they are colliding with each other, right? So some of the water molecules will, during those collisions, will break down, and they will break down and they will end up producing two ions. One is H plus one and the other one is OH minus one. Is this idea clear? तो आपका जो नॉर्मल पानी है ना, like you've got a glass of water, it's not just going to be water. It will have a few H plus one and a few OH ions as well. ठीक है? एक सेकंड होल्ड कर दो. चलिए, so is this idea clear to everyone? Here is this clear, Abira, Ahmed? Clear है
Yes,
सारों
sir.
को?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
The next part is, I told you that if, इसको नीचे कर लेते हैं. So I told you that if your water contains, if your water contains equal amounts of H plus one and OH ions, then what that indicates is that the water is neutral. Okay, that means it's pH 7. So if you're drinking a glass of water and somebody says it's neutral water, right? It is pH 7. What that means is that if there are two H plus one ions in water, they are going to be an equal amount of OH ions as well. Okay, so that is simply what is neutral water. And normal water is neutral because whenever water breaks down, it produces the same amount of H plus one and the same amount of OH ion, an equal amount of OH ions. Okay? Is this clear? Okay, what is meant by neutral, right?
जी.
Yes,
ठीक है.
sir.
अच्छा, now sometimes what happens is, like if I copy this, that there are some particles, and what those particles do is that so let's assume इन दोनों को निकाल लेते हैं. ठीक है, let's इनका तो काम खत्म हो गया. चलो, these are gone. अच्छा, so now sometimes what happens is that there are certain particles that get mixed in water. ठीक है, anything could get mixed in water. But there are certain particles that are getting added in water, and those particles they end up producing H plus one ions. ठीक है, they start releasing H plus one ions. These particles are called acids. So in your water, you've added a particle which is called an acid. It's a molecule or a compound. And all of a sudden, what happens is that your solution is now becoming acidic. So they're going to describe this solution as being acidic. They're going to call this pH being less than 7. And when your pH is less than 7, that means pH is just a technical term. It's a mathematical term. All you need to know is if the pH is less than 7, your solution or your water is going to have a lot more H plus one ions compared to OH ions. The amount of H plus one ions is going to go up compared to the amount of OH ions. And the reason this happened was that you added something in water which is called an acid, and that acid ended up producing a lot of H plus one ions. Is this idea clear?
Acid molecule, sir.
It's anything. Acid is a molecule or a compound. It could be anything. ठीक है. But by definition, what an acid is, ठीक है, उसकी definition ये कि it's known as a proton donor. It's something. Proton is known as H plus one. ठीक है. It's known as something that produces H plus one ions. So, but in simple words, अगर मैं इसे describe करूँ, an acid is a particle that. So it's is a molecule or a compound or an ion, whatever it is. Well, it could be anything as long as it produces H plus one ions. Okay, is this, I mean, is this simple concept clear that the simple concept was that water had equal amounts of H plus one and OH ions, right? What did you do? You added a particle. Okay, it could be anything, and it started producing a lot of H plus ions in water, right? And all of a sudden, your H plus ions are a lot more in quantity compared to your OH ions. पहले क्या था? They were in equal amount, right? But now there's a lot more H plus ions, and that's when you call the water being acidic. Your solution is now acidic, okay? And by definition, what an acid is, it's a proton donor, it's a molecule or a compound or ion that produces H plus ions. I can give you an example of a few of them. We're going to make a list of acids. So, for example, we did an ion which was which was hydrogen carbonate ion, right? It was a polyatomic ion. Now, what happens with this is that when you mix it in water, this H plus one breaks away from it, leaving behind carbonate ions. So, if you mix it in water, it's going to produce a lot of H plus ions in water. It's going to dissolve in water and it's going to produce a lot of H plus ions. And it could be an ion, it could be a molecule as well. There are lots of complicated molecules. I mean, it could be a molecule of HCl. You mix it in water, and all of a sudden, the H plus one breaks away and mix it in water, and the Cl ions are left behind. Okay, so all these particles, they're acids. Is that clear? ये clear है सारों को कि what an acid is? ठीक है. Ghani, is this clear? Yeah, Nabila, Ahmed, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
अच्छा, so अब acids के ना we're going to do formulas. So an acid is a particle. I think this one over here, this one is a particle that releases what ion? It produces H plus one ions. मतलब इसको कहीं भी रखो it starts producing H plus one ions. So the first thing is acid का जो formula होगा, the formula of the acid, it obviously has H plus one ions. So we're going to make a list of acids and their formulas. Okay, we're going to make a list of acids and their formulas. अच्छा ये कोई बता दे कि शाबी 2209 कौन है? Can you leave a message? चलो देख लेते हैं, वेट कर just 1 second. एक सेकंड रखो कौन. अच्छा चलो formulas of acids, ठीक है. Now the general formula of an acid is it's something that has H plus ions. You see, that's why it's producing H plus ions when you mix it in water. And when you have a positive ion, there's probably going to be something negative attached to it. Okay, so and I'm just calling it X. It could be any negative thing that could be attached to it. So the general formula of an acid looks like this. It obviously has H plus ions because it's going to release them when it dissolves in water. And there's going to be something negative that would be probably attached to it. ठीक है, positive ions के साथ there's definitely going to be something that is negative that's going to be attached to it. So one by one, we're going to start writing down formulas of acids. The first one we already did, that was HCl. So HCl is H plus one attached to Cl minus one, and that is known as, well, उसको इकट्ठा करके लिख लो, that's the formula. If you do crisscross, it's HCl, and that's known as hydrochloric acid. So another difficulty, apart from the ions that you just did, you also need to memorize the names of all these acids, and that's something that's very फंडामेंटल, ठीक है। अच्छा, H+1 and sulfate ion, कौन बताएगा what is a sulfate ion? I can attach a positive ion to a sulfate negative ion. What is the formula of sulfate?
SO4 minus 2.
ठीक है, so SO4 minus 2. So if you do crisscross, what is the formula of the acid?
H2SO4.
ठीक है, that's going to be H2SO4.
Sulfuric acid.
ठीक है, and this one is, अच्छा, this one is sulfuric acid. अच्छा, similarly other ones. So you can keep on attaching H+1 with any acid any ion that you like, as long as a positive ion is going to get attached to a negative ion. ये कौन सा ion है? इसका क्या नाम है? What is PO4 minus 3? Here, do you know what the
Phosphate.
phosphate है? ठीक है. And the formula, if you do crisscross, that's going to be H3 हो जाएगा, and PO4 would be 1, right? So you don't have to write 1, and this is known as phosphoric acid. So then you have H+1, and you can attach nitrate ions to it. Okay, that will make it +1 -1, so it's just HNO3, and that's going to be, so that's going to be nitric acid. Then you have H+1, and you can attach it with carbonate ion, which is CO3 -2. If you do that, so it's going to be, if you do crisscross, it's going to be H2 CO3, and that is your carbonic acid. So इसी तरह you have H+1, and you can attach it to और कौन सा है again? What is sulfite? क्या था? What is sulfite? Anyone? ये बात sulfite here.
Sir, SO3 minus 2.
ठीक है, it's SO3 -2. And if you do that, if you do crisscross, it's going to be H2SO3. So this one is known as
Sulfuric acid.
sulfurous.
Sulfuric acid.
वो दूसरा जो ना, that's H+1 with phosphite. Phosphite is PO3 -3. ठीक है. So that one is PO3 -3. So that is going to be H3, PO3, and this is known as, so this is known as phosphorus acid. So or कौन से? H+1 with nitrite, which is NO2 -1. So this is going to be HNO2, and this one is going to be nitrous acid. Okay, this one is going to be nitrous acid. So I guess that's a lot of acids for now. Okay, these are all the. I mean, you can pick any negative ion and you can attach H+1 to it, and that will form an acid. Okay, or water can, if you mix any of these acids. Okay, I'm going to take an example. Okay, let's say there is water. So there's a lot of H2O molecules. Okay, let's say there's a lot of H2O molecules floating around, slipping and sliding past each other. Some of the H2O molecules might have ionized as well, so there would be some H+1 and some OH ions as well, but they would be in equal quantity. Okay. But as soon as I add some acid to it, for example, if I add, what's acid add? Let's say I add hydrochloric acid to it. The hydrochloric acid will dissolve and it will ionize, and its ions will break away from each other. So it's going to form H+1 and Cl -1 ions. Okay. Now, if you have a look, So the amount of H plus ions in your solution has increased, while the amount of OH ions is pretty much the same. So as I added HCl, what has happened is that you have a lot more H plus ions compared to OH ions now. Okay, so this is what HCl did. Okay, water had equal amounts of H plus and OH ions, but as soon as you added HCl to it, the amount of H plus ions went up, and your solution is now going to be acidic. Okay. So is this thing clear that all these acids, you mix them, dissolve it in water, they're all going to produce H plus ions in water. And the more H plus ions they have, for example, H3PO3 has 3 H plus ions. So it's going to produce 3 H plus ions. मैं इनको dissociate भी कर दूं. For example, if I have sulfuric acid, बल्कि let me write this down. Okay, all acids dissociate in aqueous state. Which means if I take sulfuric acid, the ions are joined together at the moment. But as soon as you mix it in water, the two ions, H plus 1 and SO4 minus 2 ions, they're no longer going to be together. Water together, they're going to get mixed around and they'll separate. Okay, your H plus 1 ions and your sulfate ions will dissociate. So plus ka sign, I mean, you're going to write them separately. And since your formula had two H plus ions, so there's going to be two H plus ions produced and one sulfate ions. अच्छा ये याद रखो कि I mean this had, remember when we were making the formula, this had one H plus ion, and I mean when we did crisscross, when we did crisscross, there was H plus ions and there was SO4 minus 2 ions, right? So crisscross, what did it tell you? It told us the ratio in which the ions are going to be present, right? So when you dissociate them, when they are all combined together, you use small 2 and small 4, right? But when they are separate, and when they dissociate, right? When they get scattered in water. So since they are separate now, so you write this big 2. The big 2, the one that's known as the coefficient. This big 2 means that they are two H plus ions, but they are separately roaming around. They're no longer joined together. एक यहाँ पे, they're separated with water molecules. They're no longer joined together. Okay? That is why this small 2 over here, it changes into this big 2. Small 2 का मतलब है they were all combined together initially. But now they have dissociated. Okay? They have scattered. They are now separate from each other. If I have H3PO4, you mix it in water. Right now, they're all together. The ions are all together. You mix them in water, the H plus 1 and इसमें कौन से ions हैं? It's got H plus 1 and phosphate ions, right? So the H plus 1 and the phosphate ions will. Remember, phosphate ion is one thing. Remember, I told you that phosphate ion जो होता है ना, this is, इसको अलग नहीं करना है. इसको P और O को ना, you're not going to break it down further. ठीक है? Remember, our polyatomic ions are one thing. They're like one entity. You don't have to like break it apart. It's going to remain as a single entity. So this ion, you've broken it in the middle. The ions are now separate. They're all roaming around. And since this had three H plus 1 ions in the formula, so यहाँ पे you're going to write big 3. ठीक है? Big 3 indicates that they are still three H plus 1 ions, but they are no longer together. They're not joined together. They're all scattered in water. ठीक है? In aqueous state. Or state भी लिख लेते हैं. This is now. These are now aqueous ions. अच्छा, is this thing clear to everyone? Nabila, is this clear? Ghania, Zarar, Ahmed? Yeah, is
Yes,
this
sir.
clear?
Yes, sir.
So, ठीक है. अच्छा, so one thing is you need to know. अच्छा, you need to memorize these names. ठीक है, तो again, फिर से क्या करना है? Take a page, like the front of the copy or the back, something that you can easily reference, because if you forget what sulfurous acid is, right? So you pretty much can't do any past paper question. So make sure कि first page पे ना copy के notes के you write note all this down because you're gonna keep forgetting this and you would need easy reference के जहाँ पे ना you can just open it quickly and remember what was phosphoric acid. So you'll know okay phosphoric acid is made up of when an H+ combined with a phosphatide, you did crisscross and you got H3PO4. You're going to break down H3PO4. What's going to happen? The H+1 and the phosphatides are going to separate. And the formula had three H+ions. So, or separate होने के बाद, you're not going to write the small three. You're actually going to write the big three. But remember this always when it comes to formulas. Remember this always. Okay, the difference between for example 2Cl and Cl2, right? The difference between these two is the small 2 indicates okay, they're two Cls, but they are joined together. They are forming a compound. They're forming a molecule. Like अगर if they are if the two is if the big two is written in front of it, then that means you still have two Cls, but they are like not together. They are far away from each other. They don't have anything to do with each other. ठीक है? So make sure इसको बोल के यहाँ पे notes में ना I'm gonna put this over here. Okay, the difference. What does this mean? So this is your coefficient. And indicates that they are two Cl atoms not joined together. And this is known as the subscript. That indicates that they are still two Cl atoms, which are chemically combined together. Whatever, whether it's ionic compound or covalent or whatever. So both means both numbers mean the same thing, but one means that they are separate, but the other one means that they are joined together. Okay. Anyway, so we're done with the list of acids. Okay, and since we are doing acids, so all these acids, we're going to do some properties of acids. So कौन बताएगा properties of acids? What are the properties of acids? Anyone. बल्कि examples though, real world examples of acids. First one.
Lemon.
हाँ लेकिन lemon is not an acid. इसके अंदर there's a compound
उसके
which is
अंदर होता है citric acid होता है.
ठीक है. So all citrus fruits, oranges, etc. They have citric acid. अच्छा, citric acid is citric acid. No, it's an organic. It's a very complicated acid. I'm just going to show you the picture of citric acid. I mean, you don't need to remember what the formula is. I'm just going to give you an idea that what citric acid looks like. Formula. So it's a ये भी scheme जो ना. अच्छा, this is, I mean, it's a complicated molecule. You don't need to remember the formula. अच्छा, इसमें ना ये जो OH वाला H है ना, remember what an acid does. An acid, इसके ऊपर लिख सकते हैं, एक सेकंड में देखो. इसके ऊपर लिख के. अच्छा, just to give you what an acid is. अच्छा, what happens is कि this thing over here, इसका जो H है, this H over here, citric acid ends up actually losing this H and it starts producing H+ions. ये वाला H भी ना citric acid tends to, यानी जब आप उसको taste करते हो ना, the reason you get a sour taste is that citric acid starts releasing these H+1 ions. That is why you get this burning sensation, this sour taste, because citric acid. तो एसिड का काम क्या है? इट एक मॉलिक्यूल होता है, कंपाउंड होता है, आयन होता है, एनीथिंग दैट starts releasing H+ions. ठीक है, is this clear? Clear है सारों को?
Yes, sir.
लेकिन
Yes,
ये
sir.
याद ही रख, सिट्रिक एसिड याद नहीं है जो ऊपर, the ones that we just did, you have to remember those. अच्छा, anyway, citric acid is one example. Well, you should know what citric acid is, not the formula. Citric acid is in lemons, right? In citrus foods. बल्कि lemons लिख देते हैं. अच्छा, what else? You have malic acid. अच्छा, that is in apples. ठीक है. और कौन से? Kitchen में there's another acid that is usually in your fridge and you use it in cooking as well, and that's vinegar. ठीक है, वो acidic acid है, और the technical name is that it's ethanoic acid. अच्छा, plus we are actually made out of acids. Yeah, our building block is an acid. It's called an amino acid. ठीक है, amino acids, all our proteins are made out of acids. ठीक है, so but your hair, every single thing is made out of a molecule that is actually an acid molecule because it is capable of releasing H plus ions. So batteries में acid होता है, ठीक है, that is normally, अच्छा, battery acid जो होता है that's normally sulfuric acid. अच्छा, remember, in सारे acids में ना, the most popular, industrially the cheapest acid is sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is mass produced, it's very very cheap, and आपकी batteries के अंदर, all your household cleaning, it did, but even your but a lot of things have sulfuric acid or are made out of sulfuric acid. ठीक है, so sulfuric acid is like extremely important. अच्छा, properties पे आ जाओ. Properties क्या हैं? First thing, that an acid has a sour taste. ठीक है, it's got a sour taste. Bitter taste कर लो, sour taste, ठीक है. Second property, that it turns there's a litmus paper or litmus solution. तो उसको ना, it turns it from blue to red. Almost all acids are going to do that. It's a piece of paper that has litmus solution. Is you just put a few drops, or it is in the form of a paper as well. You put it in any acid, it's going to turn red. Okay. Third is it's corrosive, especially when it's concentrated.
तो मिथाइल ऑरेंज को रेड में कहते हैं.
वो इंडिकेटर्स हम वो टाइट्रेशन में पहुंचेंगे ना, फिर वो करेंगे इंडिकेटर्स. ठीक है. अच्छा, नहीं, मैं मिथाइल ऑरेंज इसलिए लिखा, मिथाइल ऑरेंज वाला जो इंडिकेटर है ना, that does not apply to all acids. So अभी फिलहाल I'm just doing properties which are applicable to pretty much all acids. ठीक है. अच्छा, corrosive, especially when concentrated, it's obviously harmful for the skin and eyes. अच्छा, actually होता बताऊँ कि why is it harmful for skin and eyes? That when HCl ionizes, for example, there's a अच्छा, your body actually has a lot of water in it. Your skin cells have water in them. Your eyes have water in them. ठीक है. So even though you don't see the water, but your skin has tiny water droplets all over it. Your hair, they have tiny, tiny water droplets, well, the water molecules sticking to them. I mean, you can't see them. Obviously, you see them when you're मतलब मुंह धोते हो बाल गीले करते हो तो obviously you see them, but even when they're not there, when you think you're completely dry, your skin is completely covered by tiny water molecules, plus the cells themselves have a lot of water in them. So the reason it's very harmful for the skin is that when you add an acid to it, so remember I told you that the acid dissociates. Okay? If you add HCl to water, the acid will start breaking down. It will start producing H plus one and Cl ions, right? So what happens is, okay, this breakdown of HCl when it starts ionizing and it starts breaking up when it mixes with water, right? And the H plus one and Cl ions they start splitting up. That produces a lot of heat. So जो burns होते हैं ना, acid burns, that's because when the acid mixes with the water that's in your skin, it ionizes and that produces a lot of heat. Okay? Even labs when you take acid, you have to dilute it, you mix it in water, the water starts boiling, literally boiling. So so acid and water, when you mix them, it produces a lot of heat. And because of that heat, which is why it's always said that if acid falls on your hand or your skin, you should not wash it with water. Okay, that will just increase the reaction. That will just increase the ionization process and it will produce even more heat. Okay. So that's why you get a burning sensation even when the acid is not very strong. Okay. So next is number 5. Okay, acids they corrode metals and limestone buildings as well. This my example is marble, etc. Right? So so all acids, a lot of corrosion that you see around you, uh, metal bridges, etc. corroding. That's because there's a lot of acid rain that happens, and that causes a lot of corrosion. I say, sir, these are properties generally of all acids. Now moving on, the next thing that we're going to start is bases. अगले page से start कर लेते हैं. अच्छा, so you got to remember the formulas of acids. And the next thing we're going to start is bases. एक property वैसे मैं लिख लेता हूँ कि number 6 we haven't, that acids react with bases to produce salts. Okay, they produce salts when the two react. And we're going to do that reaction later on. But before that, we need to understand what a base is. Base, or also known as alkalis. As a beach manner, I'm just going to do a difference first. Alkalis are basically soluble bases. Keep that in mind. बल्कि इसके आगे लिख लेता हूँ. Alkalis are those bases that dissolve in water, are soluble bases. Okay? And we're going to discuss alkalis later on. So alkalis are a subset of bases. So bases are the exact opposite of what an acid is. So acid was producing which ion? It was producing H plus ions. The base does exactly the opposite. Bases accept, or bases are, I mean, the definition is bases are proton acceptors. Proton is H plus 1. H plus 1. The reason I'm going to clarify this as well. Yeah, proton is known as an H plus ion because if you look at an H plus 1 ion, this is what an H looks like. It's got one proton and it's got one electron and it's got 0 neutron, ठीक है? But 1 proton, 1 electron, or 1 minus 1, that's 0 neutron. Now, if this H is plus 1, so that means it has lost an electron, right? So what is left in an H plus 1? It just has 1 proton, right? So when you see an H plus 1, it only contains 1 proton. So that is why very often H plus 1 is called a proton. It's just called a proton because it only has a proton. ये बात clear है सारों को? Is this clear? Nabila, is this clear? Ahmed, Ghania, is this clear?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
ठीक है, why do people call H plus 1? तो H plus 1 का nickname है, it's called a proton, ठीक है? Because the thing has just 1 proton, so why call it an H plus 1? You can simply call it a proton. अच्छा, so bases are exactly the opposite of acids. So let's assume you've got a lot of water molecules around. Here, let's say there's a container and that contains a lot of water molecules. And some of the water molecules will ionize. They'll produce H plus 1 and OH ions. Now what happens is that if I add a base, what a base does is that it accepts the protons, right? What it's going to do is it sees this H plus 1, usko grab karega, and it's going to attach it to itself. It sees another H plus 1, it's going to grab it and it's going to accept that, right? I mean, whatever it does with it, that's not a concern at the moment, but what it does is that it just grabs those H plus 1 and removes them from the solution. Now, if you look at your solution now, it's got a lot more OH ions compared to H plus 1. So the OH ions have gone up and the H plus 1 ions they've gone down. Okay, so the base does the opposite. Acid कर रहा था कि वो H plus 1 ज़्यादा कर रहा था. Now the base is what it's doing is it's increasing the OH ions, right? So the bases are proton acceptors. They remove excess protons from the solution. And that's what the definition of a base is. TK, it does exactly the opposite. And this base over here, it will try to remove as many H plus ions from the solution by grabbing or attracting them. And और वो उनको अपने साथ ले जाएगा, ठीक है? And there'll be fewer H plus ions left in the solution, ठीक है? अच्छा सारों को, is this clear what a base is?
Yes, sir.
Clear? अच्छा, so we didn't do formulas of bases now. We'll do that in the next class, but just a quick recap. Okay, what did an acid do? Okay, acid was a molecule that would increase the amount of H plus ions, right, in the solution. And so acids are molecules or ions that will produce, when you dissolve them in water, they're going to produce H plus ions. The general formulas are that they obviously have an H plus ion, and there must be some negative ion that's sticking to them. And we did a list of acids which you should know. That you should know their names, you should know their formulas, you should know what ions make those formulas, right? If you know phosphorus acid, you should know that it's H3PO3. You should know that it contains H plus 1 and PO3 minus 3 ions. So that detail has to be memorized. As soon as you add any of these acids, they're going to increase the amount of H plus ions that are present in the solution. And they're going to dissociate. Okay? They're going to release H plus ions. Okay? So ये ज़्यादा important चीज़ थी. So I'm going to share this. ये मैं उसमें भेज रहा हूँ ग्रुप में notes.
सर वो
हाँ
लास्ट चैप्टर का वो मेटल्स वाला पार्ट नहीं एडेड उसके अंदर, जो आपने नोट्स पहले भेजे थे वो भी भेजेंगे।
चलो मैं दोबारा भेजता हूँ, ठीक है?